incarcerated population, as the Secretary mentioned, really started to, we have a chart here with 31 months, and if you look at June of '08, we really started to level off and decrease our incarcerated population for quite a long period of time, which, as the Secretary mentioned, after 20 or 25 years of growth in the department was pretty remarkable over a 18 to 24-month period. But over the last 17 months, the population started to increase pretty dramatically. In the last 17 months, we have increased by 224 offenders incarcerated, which is an 11% increase, which is almost 1% a month. As Rob also mentioned, over the last 3 or 4 months, we've started to plateau a bit, which is a little bit of good news. But when we built the 2010 budget, we only built an assumption of 2 a month, which at the time felt like a pretty unconservative budget mechanism, because our population was in fact decreasing. So what we did was we tried to hone in on where the growth was coming from. Is it corrections? Is it through sentencing? And so the second chart shows pretrial detainees. And again, if you focus on June of '08 to November of '09, our detention population has increased by 90 cases, 87 cases. We've broken them down by offenses, other property and drug, violent, and then sex. And so the bottom two are really the growth trends that we're watching. And sex offenses and violent offenses make up about half of that growth, a little more than half of that growth in the detention population. So it's pretrial detainees. The next chart is sex offenders.
Women seem to have increased.
Yeah, so this morning we were at 158 females in St. Albans, which is still a decrease from where we were a few years ago. We topped out at about 190 before we had the HA 59 initiative, and really, the number has really stagnated around 150.
But it has been down.
We had it down around 100 and the state had it down around 110 or less. But it came up rather quickly, and then it's kind of stagnated around 150.
Are these abuse cases? Do you have any sense of?
I'm not sure. Do we break out females? We can break out females. We can.
That's okay.
I can give you a
I'm just
breakout of that.
wondering.
The next chart is sex offenders. Sex offenders have seen a remarkable increase.
Can I just ask a question before we shoot? Other violent, what's included in that? Robberies or armed robbery or?
It's any violent offense. It's not a sex offense, essentially. So you know the list of those off the top of your head? There was a whole ton of them.
Right, I mean, it would be burglary occupied, it would be aggravated assault, armed robbery, any violent offense other than a sexual offense. Domestic assault would likely
Do
be
you
in
see
there.
any increase in any of this as a result of any connection to the recession?
We're going to drill down. Well, you know, all the leading criminologists in the country always suggest that there is absolutely no tie. If you look at the 90s when the economy was really growing a lot, our incarcerated population was absolutely humming along. And then if you look at when the recession begins 48 months ago or so, our population was actually dropping. So it was kind of, it was counterintuitive. But so it doesn't necessarily track the economy. At least not at a state correct. Page 3 is sex offenders. Now, we are up 81 new sex offender cases in the last 17 months. That's post work done. I can only theorize that that had a remarkable effect on sentencing, detaining of sex offenders. Certainly, if you look at the first two numbers on the right-hand side, we've had an increase of 14 offenders who have been violated over what we would normally experience. So the whole system has kind of reacted a little bit. Now we've introduced some new rules around sex offender movement through the system, probation discharges, and all those things. Hopefully those will start to have a positive impact and bring the population back down a little bit. But we've had an increase in sentencing of sex offenders. We've had the third number down is pre-min. So the number of sex offenders that were pre-min.
What's that mean?
The number of sex offenders that were pre-min before June of '08, pre-min
Pre-minimum.
before their minimum sentence, and the number of sex offenders that are pre-minimum after have increased by over 10%. So it's a remarkable increase. So sex offenders are a driver. Page 4 is other violent offenders, the crimes that Deputy Commissioner Menard just kind of rattled off. They're up remarkably too over the last 17 months. So it's really a combination of sex offenders and violent offenders that are driving the population. The last page is not, page 5 is property and drug. And I think if you remember some of the HA 59 work, we wanted this number to come down, and it is in fact coming down. And other nonviolent offenders on the last page.
When was that implemented?
Well, it's been implemented, I would say, last 18 months or so.
We started in March of, oh wait, thanks, I'm
It was about 18. So I think the effect that we wanted to have, which is low-level offenders are involved in incarceration less, is actually happening. Higher-level offenders are incarcerated more, is actually.
Are what?
Are incarcerated more, is having an effect. The 70% sex offender rule, which I think is gonna be a matter of litigation with the state, because we applied it retrospectively to all sex offenders, is gonna have is a driver in this. So I think the general direction of where we wanted it to go, more violent offenders held for a longer period of time, is happening. The downside of that is, I just handed you a budget adjustment for $2.6 million. So that's basically the,
Are sex offenders though allowed to be out of state?
yes, incarcerated in CCA. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes, they are. I would say, if you look at the number of sex offenders, we have 511 sex offenders, and more than a quarter are male offenders and sex offenders at this point. So, you know, if you go back 10 years in the department, or 8 years, we had a real profile of who went out of state. A third of our population now is housed out of state. Almost every offender in our system spends some time, a portion of their sentence, if they're doing any appreciable amount of time, in a CCA facility. It's just the reality of where we are. It used to be they would come back 6 months before their minimum. They're coming back closer to that now, 30 days in some cases. It's not unusual for us to have 40 new offenders lodged over a weekend, which for a system like ours is considerable. So we're really managing overcrowding at CCA, and so everybody's going